Hello and welcome to our Make for Prosperity Week by the Mohammed bin Rashid Initiative for Global Prosperity. Throughout this week, you will meet our 20 Global Maker Challenge finalists, each of them presenting unique solutions during our 4 pitching sessions and competing for prizes and mentorship worth up to $1 million. This year, the Global Maker Challenge received more than 3,400 entries. And after a thorough review and assessment process by MIT University's Solve Initiative and our expert panel of judges, 5 finalists have been selected within each of our 4 themed challenges. Innovation for Peace and Justice, Sustainable and Healthy Food for All, Innovation for Inclusive Trade, and Climate Change. So when during these 4 days you get to know our finalists and their innovative solutions, make sure that you share your thoughts and impressions also on social media, simply by using our hashtag #MakeForProsperityWeek. So today we are kicking off the week with our first challenge, Innovation for Peace and Justice, and the question, how can displaced populations access affordable and quality services that are essential to their safety and well-being? But first, and as an additional highlight, we start the day with a short yet insightful presentation by a successful entrepreneur and changemaker, Kenneth Kwok. Kenneth is founder and CEO of Global Citizen Capital, and he will talk about how the pandemic has magnified the digital divide. With most people turning to digital solutions, it has become more and more obvious how especially rural areas continue to suffer from low and poor connectivity. So today, Kenneth will share his thoughts on how we can effectively use 4IR technology tools to tackle current and unforeseen challenges.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kenneth. I am the founder and CEO of Global Citizen Capital. I'm very honored here today to be able to speak on a topic that's actually quite dear to my own personal passions and convictions, and that is education. Global Citizen Capital was born as an impact venture for Asian family offices to essentially transform, especially for the second generation that is going to take over the family businesses, and turn their initiatives, their efforts, both for profit and nonprofit, into impact and sustainable ventures. My goal here today is to spend around 15 to 20 minutes going deep into how COVID-19 as a pandemic has magnified the digital divide. Clearly, as you can imagine, I will make a few references to a few sustainable development goals. Primary one being number 4, quality education. In fact, today, I'm actually, seated in our education center. In Hong Kong, we have a partnership with Causeway Education to teach a young SDG leadership program, because we strongly believe that no matter how developed your country is in terms of, GDP per capita, it is still very important that, children and youth as young as 10 years old get to understand and learn about what they can do to help this world become a more sustainable place for all and future generations to live in. So without further ado, we shall start with the official panel of the day, the theme being, how has the pandemic magnified the digital divide? Just a bit of background. Since COVID-19 has affected probably everyone's daily life, 105 countries have closed temporarily, some longer than others, educational institutions. Almost 1 billion students, both children and youth around the globe, has been impacted by this. And of course, for those of us who have children, as you can imagine, education quickly pivoted to online. We in Hong Kong, as well as many developed countries where broadband and internet is more developed, the issue has not been about the actual connectivity, but about the quality of how teachers have pivoted into turning their education and their lessons into digital mode. Unfortunately, for many countries in the world, and these countries, as I would like to classify them as less developed countries. So what is my category or definition of less developed countries? It's primarily into three. One is what I call LDCs, least developed countries. The second is what I call landlocked developing countries, which are LLDCs. And lastly, what I call SIDS, small island developing states. And across these three categories, as you can imagine, there was a much bigger impact on the ability to continue education for the youth and the children there. Clearly, bridging the gap between urban and rural communities is one of the prime importance and focus points of a lot of the national and international educational planning. But at the same time, for communities, suffering from poor and low connectivity rates, especially amplified by the coronavirus and the wider community impact. Can you imagine what that does to a country where they depend on the youth to uplift their economic output, where they depend on the youth to learn from every single virtual platform available, not just about subjects, but more about networking, on the job training. Like, because of the inability to sustain high quality internet access, a lot of these opportunities are foregone. So I think ultimately, in terms of education, and I personally define education as something which is lifelong learning. Many studies have shown that if you actually believe or embrace in lifelong learning, the cognitive function inside your brain will continue to develop no matter your age. There are some, misconceptions where, once you finish high school or college, your brain starts growing, but that has been proven not to be 100% correct. Yes, indeed, our brain does slow throughout time as we embrace new ideas and new information. But that's why practice is so important. So even for me, who is inching towards 40 years old, we must continue to practice. And again, we're benefiting from the fact that connectivity is available readily in developed countries. So how can the fourth industrial revolution, really help or shape, or more importantly, influence, so that going forward, whether COVID continues, and hopefully, we pray that the situation would be on the mend for a lot of countries going forward with the arrival of vaccines, with the increased ramp up production of surgical PPEs, and better methodology to protect our frontline healthcare workers and the wider community. In the meantime, how can we ensure the sustainability of the rural communities within efforts to promote connectivity? Here today, I would like to briefly discuss essentially the core technology that is driving the fourth industrial revolution, and how they can help and promote the furtherment of education in even the least developed communities in the world. So let's start off with the big thing, which everybody calls it, rightfully so, big data. Big data, as you can imagine, from smartphones to manufacturing plants to refrigerators, right? Everything is producing data. Based on a very simple analysis that was conducted by UNDP and LDCs in collaboration with United Nations Technology Bank, only 27% of LDCs currently actually can say they have sustainable strategy when it comes to virtual education. And clearly this survey was done very recently and with limited data, but at the same time, it shows you that, putting things into perspective, 1 out of 4 children and youth right now in LDCs can effectively learn as if they were learning in a normal in-classroom setting. That itself, if you think about it, it's a pretty meaningful number in the sense where in LDCs, the percentage of children being even able to be educated and study is already low to begin with. Imagine just taking a quarter of that, right? So when we stress about big data, it's hopefully in the fourth industrial revolution, anything that's collected through a device, either in a corporate setting or in an institutional setting or even in a family setting, hopefully these become data points which we can use to help amplify the educational components of whatever we learn, whether it be in school, whether it be at the job, or whether it be at, again, personal environments. Because in my humble understanding, and this is how my personal journey began in education, is that we don't believe that education is all about being in school and learning from the books. With the advance of the internet, with the advance of, again, data that is collected through every single thing that you do as a human being currently with access to your smartphone, right? There are so many ways to train someone and make them eligible for gainful employment. So back to the point of big data, we must definitely embrace the collection, the analysis, and most importantly, the proliferation of tools that allows any student, no matter where they are, and with limited bandwidth and connectivity, to access this data, to learn, and to have a targeted way of ensuring that their future can be protected. Because I'm going to use an example here. Some of the projects that we have done in South Africa and West Africa recently, as well as in Oman actually, is on surgical PPE. With the rise of COVID, there are a lot of schools that basically remained closed because of lack of protective gear to ensure that the students and the teachers can teach and learn in a secure setting. So, of course, production of surgical masks, which, we have a company called Family Mask, and we have been donating and selling at cost a lot of these schools and educational and academic institutions, right? The data, shockingly enough, is not how these masks are protecting the public. It's actually on how these masks are allowing the recurrence or rehappening of daily activity of youth and children who are learning from home, who are learning, using virtual settings, and more importantly, who are learning during their day jobs, supporting their family in different ways. So in a nutshell, if I was going to be an advocate of big data and linking it to education in a least or less developed countries, my point definitely is to have targeted use of data to empower each student or youth to be able to pursue the career of their choice that comes out of their passion. Because let's face it, even for me, who have had the benefit of working in so many different professions and learning from people from all walks of life, education can be very wide. But for a less developed countries, it's about equipping each youth and each child with the necessary tools for them to pursue their first meaningful job. And I think that was where big data can come in. Secondly, artificial intelligence. This is a very wide and broad topic. Definitely focusing on programming and using data in artificial intelligence is as many ways as possible, rather than following just a simple set of instructions. In the world of education in least developed countries, AI has a certain benefit, which is it trains the computers or the programmers and itself, the apps, on how to use, again, a limited bandwidth environment to deliver the most learning. And again, the focus of today's talk here is not about taking advantage of limited data that's available. Of course, in the real world and in an idealistic scenario, we would want nothing more for the proliferation of accessible broadband to every single corner of the earth. That, unfortunately, is a humongous infrastructural investment. And therefore, sometimes being practical, as sometimes you have to be, the focus perhaps is on how do we take advantage or make the most or the best use of the existing infrastructure and still achieving the minimum educational goals that we set aside. So again, with AI, there will be some efficiencies that will be derived from amplifying and instilling and integrating AI solutions into your everyday course curriculum. The third thing I would like to talk about here is robotics. Again, a lot of people think of robotics as just, a replacement of human labor. While that is true, I personally see this more as robotics taking over tasks that are dangerous, that are not as efficient while they are done by humans. As you can see by COVID, just delivering food from point A to point B while observing social distancing rules, right? That's the purpose of having robotics. From an education point of view, I think a lot of the students right now with the internet, with access to endless YouTube channels of learning, and with a lot of institutions, even the largest name branded universities and colleges in the world, such as Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, MIT, and my alma mater, UPenn and Wharton, we are all open sourcing a lot of the education meant for university students or alumni. But no, we're taking them and allowing anybody with interest to listen to panels, to listen to virtual talks or demos. And when it comes to robotics, right, I strongly believe that if the youth in developed countries and developing countries can join hands and work together like a buddy system to help build essential robotics needed to amplify learning and to accentuate and to bypass the limited bandwidth. I think robotics itself, being something that is a machine and can have downloaded information in advance, that could play a good role in using these type of technology and replacing certain teaching modules that has to be taught by professional adult teachers. Again, in an idealistic world, if a robot can become full-time teachers, of course, that would be something that may happen many years away. But at the same time, for curriculums such as grade 1 to grade 5, there are lots and lots of materials which can be used to be taught, if not at least in the exercise part or the practice part or the rehearsal parts can be taken over by simple robotics. The fourth topic I would like to address here is another one of my favorites, only because I've actually been benefited from using these technology, not only at our impact venture arm, but also our education arm, and that is virtual and augmented reality. Again, even with limited bandwidth arising from lack of infrastructure in less developed countries, being able to download and pre-install a lot of knowledge and information into VR kits and AR kits have really helped joining the physical world, the digital world, and the biological world in one. And just as an example, right, even within our Young SDG program, 20% I would believe in our curriculum are conducted using virtual and augmented reality, where people, because they cannot travel right now, they put on a device and we have a virtual showroom modeled as if you're actually entering the United Nations Geneva headquarters. and then knocking on various doors, and each of our classroom represents a different SDG. And inside the SDG room, you get to see case studies, you get to see young startups, you get to see interviews or sharing sessions of students, all teaching and sharing in what I call the lowest common denominator way of explaining, which are using simple words in simple manners discussed over simple platforms, so that, again, while reducing the burden required on very complex solutions, because these, as you can tell, may not be stable in certain countries with less broadband infrastructure. And what we have realized is, the students that have taken that 20% virtually, they actually tend to remember more of the material than me sitting in front of them, teaching them and sharing face-to-face. Because you know why? With augmented and virtual reality, it is literally a six senses, 360 holistic sensational learning. And I think that sometimes even functions better than in person. How the pandemic has magnified the digital divide to how has, now that we have learned how pandemics work in the sense of COVID, how do we take that magnification and pivot towards ensuring in the future through using the fourth industrial revolution tools that we have mentioned earlier today, as well as real life scenarios on how to reduce the burden of broadband, so that if even the broadband situation continues due to lack of infrastructural investments, that students and youth can still learn as much as they can and take that knowledge that they have and apply it to things that impact their daily lives. I think that is really one of the things that we as impact investors can continue to advance, to pursue, to have discussions, and more importantly, to work with organizations to help bring these technical solutions into education reform for the least developed countries. Thank you so much again for having me today. My name is Kenneth from Global Citizen Capital. We look forward to continuing these discussions for the sake of ensuring that no child is left behind in education due to infrastructural and broadband limitations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kenneth, for your valuable insights and for joining the Initiative for Global Prosperity. It's time for our first challenge and our first 5 finalists, but before, to get you in the right spirit for our Peace and Justice Challenge, we have prepared a short video for you.
Tout le monde a du mal à quitter chez lui. Mais lorsque tu te décides de quitter chez toi, sans qu'on te demande, mais les situations que tu vis te demandent à quitter, c'est comme si on t'est chassé de chez toi. Et arriver quelque part, et les gens encore l'air traitent différemment.
This story is just one of 65 million people who have been forcibly displaced from their homes. This rapid increase in movement has major implications on peace and justice. Affected by lack of opportunities, violent conflicts, economic displacement, and climate change, the forced migration of vulnerable people is happening in all parts of the world.
Il y a eu des moments très difficiles pour arriver jusqu'ici. D'aucuns ont perdu la vie. Mais moi, je suis là. C'était vraiment risquant, mais ça en valait le coup. Ça en valait le coup pour avoir.
At least 2 billion people are living in areas affected by conflict. Countries on the receiving end are concerned about employment, about infrastructure, and about the safety and security of their people. These are concerns that are fueled by a growing anti-immigration movement, resulting in refugees being abandoned and facing social rejection.
ما بدنا نكون متقوقعين، ما بدنا نكون عالة عليكم. في ناس كثير متعلمة، ناس كثير فهمانة ومثقفة، تطمح تبني مستقبل. ما غامرنا في إنه نخوض تجربة البحر والموت، لأنه إحنا جايين بس ناكل ونشرب ونقعد. لا، جايين نبني ونبني كثير كمان في هذه الدول، راح نعتبرها دولنا لأنه أوطاننا للأسف تدمرت.
لازم يكون عندك لغة عشان تشتغل، بدون اللغة مش راح تقدر تخطي أي خطوة، بدون اللغة ما بيستطيع الواحد يتحرك أو يعيش.
المهم إنه يعني قدر الإمكان بنحاول نستغل الوقت صح، بنفس الوقت نستغله في إشي صح، يعني منه بنرفع من مستوى اللغة، يعني نتعرف على اللايف ستايل تبعهم، بنحاول نخش في الجو ونكون مهيئين قدر الإمكان يعني.
Integration it's not a one-way process. We have to start working at the other end and prepare ourselves. So it's not only that they have to learn from us, but we also have to learn from them.
A disjointed society can only threaten stability, elevating the uncertainty of a prosperous future and questioning the fundamental pillars of peace and justice. Our values are being tested, and our basic rights as human beings are overlooked. Is this the world we had hoped for our children and our children's children? So, can you make it forward? If you were given the chance to change a life, what would you do? To provide millions of displaced people an opportunity to live, learn, and work, and where their safety and well-being is uncompromised. Because we believe that access to innovation paves the way to building prosperity.
Excited to meet our finalists? Then let's start right away with our pitch session. 5 ambitious companies, 5 unique solutions, and only 5 minutes each for Aiyin, ID 2020, PeaceTech Lab, Peripheral Vision International, and Simbi Foundation.
My name is Haris. I'm the co-founder of Aiyin, and I'm going to talk about the 428,000 refugee students in Pakistan that are facing a lack of quality learning resources and infrastructure. This only makes up to 10% of the 13 million under 18 refugees displaced globally. The existing solutions that the schools and NGOs incorporate are that they convert books to ebooks, blackboards to smartboards, and then we have massive amounts of online courses converting lecture hall lessons to online material. These solutions are unregulated, inefficient, non-interactive, and do not meet the learning outcomes. Aiyin delivers trainings through virtual reality that feel near to real, are measurable, retain knowledge up to 130%. It's proven through research that because of the digital delivery, safer environments, and time dilation, these virtual trainings are 110% more effective than the real-world trainings. With our solution, frog dissections were carried out in schools that didn't even have the infrastructure for classrooms. We brought in game designers to create stories, researchers to develop more insights, and psychologists to create environments where students engage and learn the reason why they're learning a topic in the first place. We develop a lab ecosystem that offers rich content for high school laboratories, as well as skill development experiences for youth, language learning, and even corporate trainings, all at a cost that is 50 times less than actual labs. That means that one goggle contains multi-million-dollar labs of physics, biology, robotics, industrial training, and so much more. And after that, let me tell you how a student benefits from the VR lab. A teacher selects a lesson and runs the lesson in VR. The students join the sessions in VR and they all can see their avatars, and they learn and engage with the virtual environment. And in those environments, we've placed artificially intelligent avatars that help them assist assist them in their tasks. And after the lesson is completed, they present the teacher with data and analytics that show the effectiveness of the learning in the virtual environment. Now, we've tested this with over 1,358 people, and we've had success with them in the past 6 months. We've successfully delivered 1.3 million minutes of VR training and counting. For now, we are expecting an increment of 50 schools per year, which will consequently make this initiative self-sustaining with 27,000 users by the end of the year 2022, generating almost $0.62 million in the first 3 years. And we aim at reducing barriers to education and skills training for displaced youth by partnering with tech giants such as Samsung to also take help in the hardware to develop standalone VR devices for institutes to further reduce lab costs. Apart from VR, our virtual labs are also supported by low-end tablets and desktops to drive mass adoption and reduce duplication of resources. By the year 2021, we plan to transition to cloud-based virtual labs to further complement remote learning. On the ground, how we are going to scale is that we want to link up with organizations that have multiple schools so we can easily deploy in them. We want to engage with CSR organizations. We want to partner with local educational sectors and deploy our solution over there. And once that's done, we want to scale with organizations having international outreach. Like we're already working with UNDP in Pakistan, and Jazz is a solutions provider to NIC and telecom company that we tend to use their CSR budget to develop our hardware for these labs. How can the Mohammed bin Rashid initiative help us in this projects? With the MBR initiative, we have a huge potential for scalability. We can create more content and reach out to more people. And according to the calculations, we can secure up to 108,000 users within the first 3 years, with an increase in revenue, which is estimated to be almost $2.4 million, and reduce barriers to education and skills training for the at-risk youth in resource-scarred areas. Thank you.
I'm Dakota Gruner. I'm the Executive Director of ID 2020, and thank you for having me here today. Digital ID has the potential to be one of the greatest force multipliers for global social and economic development. Responsibly implemented, it offers an opportunity to improve both access to and the quality of programs. For the 1 in 7 people globally who today are unable to prove their identity, digital ID means finally being able to access education, healthcare, and other social services, exercise their rights as citizens and voters, and participate in the modern economy. Since 2016, ID 2020 has advocated for ethical, privacy-protecting approaches to digital ID. We talk a lot about good ID. What we mean by that is that your digital ID should accompany you throughout your life. It should be unique to you, accessible anywhere, and perhaps importantly, you should control access to your personal data. To realize a future where all ID is good ID, ID 2020 develops and applies rigorous technical standards to certify best-in-class identity solutions, provides advisory services and implements pilot programs, and advocates with governments to protect user privacy and put control of personal data back where it belongs, in the hands of the individual. Our engagement with digital ID isn't just theoretical. We constantly test and reassess our assumptions against the complexities of implementing programs on the ground. Our programs enable us to impact lives directly by offering the benefits and mitigating the risks of digital ID for some of the world's most vulnerable populations in some of the most challenging settings. This work has taken us around the world. We currently have active programs in Thailand, Indonesia, and Bangladesh, and are quickly scaling globally. Established in 1984, the Mela camp is home to approximately 40,000 individuals who fled persecution and violence in the Karen state of Myanmar, and were subsequently denied entrance by Thailand. The majority of residents have spent their lives within the confines of the camp, receiving services from a consortium of NGOs. All of their accomplishments, their health records, and their personal information are tied to camp systems. But the camp will not exist indefinitely. ID 2020, in partnership with the International Rescue Committee and iRespond, a nonprofit biometric provider, implemented a program to give control of personal information back to these residents. Since October 2018, we have interviewed community leaders, implemented the necessary infrastructure, and enrolled 8,240 camp residents. The digital ID platform uses a combination of iris scan biometrics and Hyperledger Indy blockchain to provide access to and to store verifiable records. We started with patients suffering from chronic health conditions who would derive the greatest immediate benefit from improvements to the continuity of care. Since then, we have extended enrollment to other healthcare services within the camp, including maternal and child care, immunizations, and outpatient care. But we're just scratching the surface. Based on what we have learned to date with this grant, we believe this platform can be readily expanded to serve other important functions. Of particular importance to camp residents is their personal profiles, which hold a record of their educational attainment and professional qualifications. Our first step begins with enrolling 400 residents who are participating in livelihood programs currently. The chosen individuals are already involved in extensive programs with IRC and therefore can provide more immediate feedback on risks and opportunities. When these individuals ultimately relocate from the camp, their personal profiles will be critical to accessing employment in the formal sector. And without these qualifications, these displaced people would be more vulnerable to abuse or even enslavement. ID 2020 will share these learnings publicly and broadly. What we learn will serve as the basis for more replication, both within these camps and hopefully throughout the field of humanitarian practice. We would extend this program beyond the 40,000 residents of this camp to over 91,000 residents of 9 regional camps and potentially to 70 million displaced people worldwide. Some programs promise to expand access to services and others promise to improve the quality of such services. Digital ID holds the potential to accomplish both, while simultaneously reducing the cost of program delivery for NGOs and governments. We believe that this potential is so great that over the next decade, digital ID will become a core component of most development and humanitarian programs. Programs like the Mela Camp program offer the ability to prove these concepts and share the learning such that these approaches can be broadly replicated and scaled. When we, as development professionals, talk about scaling development services, this is how we get there. Thank you.
I'm Luis Teixeira, and I want to tell you about PeaceTech On-Demand Services, or PODS, a new way to scale legal services for refugees. Refugees aren't just individuals, they're families, and each member is affected by the journey. Take 14-year-old Shafak, who is behind 2 years of school because her family was forced to continuously move around Lebanon, not sure of what their rights were as foreigners. There are the real impacts that refugees face and refugee families face, that there are no options when you go to a new land and don't have knowledge or support. According to the UN, there are 71 million refugees who stay in camps an average of 17 years, an insurmountable amount of time. They face legal issues like securing housing, safeguarding rights, and access to basic services. But the average cost of 1 hour of legal help is more than many refugees make in a year. That means that the people who need it the most, those whose livelihoods are at stake, don't get it. That's where we step in. PeaceTech Lab has trained over 1,400 organizations on technology innovations to solve conflict. We provided technical tools and training to Kurdish displaced communities in northern Iraq, migrant advocacy groups in Niger, and aid workers serving South Sudanese refugees. Legal assistance is necessary if we are to effect positive change, and our experience has put us in the position to make that a reality. In 2016, we partnered with the Afghanistan Legal Aid and Advocate Network to create a shared electronic platform to connect prisoners with 100 legal fellows, expediting cases that otherwise would take years to close. We also held workshops and facilitated discussion groups with 2 separate refugee camps in East Africa, reaching well beyond 700,000 refugees. The final evaluation results are still being tallied. We're combining this experience with an exciting new partnership. Hogan Lovells has a 50-year legacy of award-winning pro bono work. PeaceTech Lab is their fully exclusive global citizen partner. which grants us access to the firm's 9,000 employees worldwide and provides crucial guidance in launching the legal needs assessment and pilot phase of the project. The pilot involves a two-phased approach. The first phase is focused on effective impact. Many refugee cases that need legal assistance have similar patterns that can be resolved with answers to a few key questions. But law firms can't afford to set thousands of in-person meetings to work through them individually. We are going to exponentially increase participation of lawyers with technology, making the process of engagement easier and cheaper for everyone. We will work with the world's best legal experts to make solutions accessible and develop a chatbot. This is a digital AI system that will simulate natural conversation so refugees can ask and have their questions answered 24 hours a day, automating guidance for up to 80% of the legal issues that they face, and queuing up those that need more assistance for follow-up. This means that Shafaq's father can have a single WhatsApp conversation and get the forms that he needs to establish residency and provide her with the home and education that she deserves. The second phase involves expanding the success of the first pilot to cover the Zatari refugee camp in Jordan and training in-country lawyers and NGOs on these tech tools to best serve their clients. We have used similar training model in northern Uganda to reach over 660,000 refugees in East Africa. In addition to Hogan Lovells, we have worked with 3 other AmLaw 100 firms, all of whom expressed interest in this project. We are not only building something for now, but kickstarting a sustainable structure with funding and support from many organizations. The pilot project has the potential to provide legal support to nearly 250,000 refugees, but it's also worth noting that when we submitted this presentation, COVID wasn't on anyone's radar. But now this virtual platform that we build can provide critical remote assistance if coronavirus threatens these camps in large numbers. According to the UN, 1 person is forcibly displaced every 2 seconds. That means that in the time that I gave this presentation, 150 more refugees were created. PeaceTech On-Demand Services is a project whose objectives are urgent, relevant, and demand the sustained attention of the international community. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paul Falzone, and I'm the Executive Director of Peripheral Vision International. And I thank you for listening to a presentation called WANJI, Interactive Mobile Education to Boost Refugee Employment. Our organization has been working for almost a decade across the developing world to reach last-mile communities in innovative ways. We're very much focused on distribution, on going where other organizations haven't. And you can read about our work in a variety of publications. But the project I want to talk about today emerged from something that we were seeing increasingly in the field. And that is that the digital divide was growing. That is the difference between the digital haves and have-nots. And there are a variety of covariates that come in. Gender, for instance, women were having a worse time of this divide. Literacy, whether you could read or write, what language you could read or write in, whether or not you were disabled. And income was a huge variable. So marginalized people were getting left further and further behind, not only because they couldn't afford technology, like computers and smartphones, but because they didn't have access to signal, or they couldn't afford the data. And all of this is made worse in contexts like the one you see here, which is a refugee camp in Uganda. But there are also potentials and unexplored opportunities that we looked at. One of them was cell phones, the ubiquity of cell phones. Estimates say that more than 87% of the people in the world have some kind of access, either personally or in their home, to cell phones. But for most people, this means a basic phone, like you see in this picture. All of these photographs were taken in Uganda. And people use the phone primarily for audio purposes, so they can't necessarily read or write in their primary language. Therefore, text is not the best tool. But if you can speak to someone in a spoken language, that is content that they understand and connect to. This is part of the reason that radio is such a popular medium in the developing world. And when we began to look at learning, we found that if you make learning interactive, if there's give and take, then learning is amplified. And that's where WANJI emerged. The idea is simple. A user can call a toll-free number and encounter a story, a first-person story. For instance, harvest has just ended. What will you do with your crop? Press 1 to sell it now. Press 2 to store it until the price goes up. This ability to practice counterfactual thinking and to role-play real-life scenarios boosts learning immeasurably. We piloted it, we prototyped it, we tested it, and we were able to win the MIT Solve Prize in recognition of our early efforts. This gave us the ability to scale. Over the last year and a half, Wanji has scaled to, soon it'll be 17 countries, and we will have reached our 2nd million caller. And we've been doing this with major clients, BBC Media Action, several UN agencies, the British Council, who have sponsored stories on everything from public health to financial savings to agriculture. Another innovative thing about this platform is that we've been able to measure and prove impact. You can do this in 2 ways. 1, you can measure choices made within the games, and we've worked with the Busara Center for Behavioral Economics to do some of that. And recently, we just performed our first major experiment in Cambodia, which is the picture on the right, that demonstrated we were able to change people's job-seeking behavior even after a single call, and especially after 2 calls. That study will soon be published in the International Journal of Communication. And the importance of teaching at a distance has never been more salient. COVID has really done away with the ability to have small groups or in-person learning. So we feel that Wanji now more than ever is a tool and a platform that can be used in the most marginalized areas, which is why we're reaching out to you now. We believe that a partnership with the Mohammed bin Rashid Initiative for Global Prosperity can help us take this tool and reach those last mile communities in refugee camps with job-seeking lessons that will enhance soft skills and help give people the tools they need to create better livelihoods in a fast-changing world. I thank you for your time and for your attention.
Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Friedland, and it's a pleasure to tell you about the Brighter Future Initiative, our scalable solution to enhance access to education in refugee settlements. There are currently 3.5 million refugee learners around the world who lack access to education. Over 140,000 of them are in the Bidi Bidi refugee settlement in northern Uganda, where students travel 5 to 7 kilometers to school and arrive in overcrowded classrooms without electricity or lighting, a 94-to-1 teacher to student ratio, and an 8-to-1 textbook to student ratio. And COVID-19 has only exacerbated these problems. Over the past 4 years, we've been working with partner communities, and our joint effort has resulted in the Brightbox Macro, a cost-effective digital classroom built from solar-powered shipping container. The Brightbox provides offline curriculum materials that match the national Ugandan curriculum, our own research-accredited learning aids, and an educational hardware which supports 6,000 learners per week. In the bottom right, we can see the macro core components, which are repackaged into a smaller format as part of our rollout strategy. With a build time of just 5 days, the Brightbox Macro is not just a classroom, but a sustainable and scalable microgrid for the wider school and community. Power is distributed to surrounding classroom blocks, supporting additional projectors, lighting in the evening, and more access to digital resources, so learning can happen faster and for longer. Our model is a simple one. Once a school is chosen with guidance from the UNHCR, teachers are trained with the technology at nearby training centers. This means that once the new macro is installed, teachers are already familiar with the technology. Student learning is enhanced in the macro and surrounding classroom blocks, which are able to connect to the localized internet, which now have electricity for lighting and projectors to extend learning time and to make it more efficient. Community members can also engage in evening vocational and academic learning in the macro classroom. And the microgrid provides sustainable power, allowing community members, healthcare practitioners, and other aid organizations to plug into the macro and to use it as a hub for charging and operations, scaling the macro's impact potential. And the solar charging model is how we ensure sustainability. This model enables 3 outcomes. 1, sustainable power, 2, revenue generation, and 3, community self-reliance. Brightbox classrooms are fitted to operate as device charging stations, powering school equipment, surrounding classroom blocks, and providing a competitively priced device charging service for the wider community. The revenue generated by charging stations contributes to self-reliance, supporting costs such as teacher salaries, infrastructure maintenance, and technology upgrades. The integration of this revenue stream incentivizes partner communities to sustainably maintain and grow the entire system. And as these macros generate revenue, they will fund additional installations. With 18 installs in Uganda and India, the Brightbox model has positively impacted education for over 37,000 students in the last 4 years, and has been validated as a sustainable, community-supported intervention that can be effectively scaled. We have developed trusting relationships with our partner communities, particularly those in the Bidi Bidi refugee settlement, as well as partnerships with National Geographic, Finchurch Aid, and the UNHCR, with whom we have agreed to scale our solution in 4 additional refugee settlements in Uganda in order to support 1.2 million more learners. We have already impacted 37,000 students, and with your support, our next step is to support 100,000 learners in Bidi Bidi refugee settlements by the end of 2021. Over the next 5 years, we will support 255,000 learners in Uganda's refugee settlements with 17 Brightbox macros. Our ultimate vision and 10-year goal is to offer the Brightbox model as a global, sustainable, community-owned solution, giving every student the chance to learn and build a brighter future, no matter their location or circumstance. We are well suited to fulfill the Mohammed bin Rashid Global Prosperity Initiative for peace and justice, and provide the quality digital educational services that are needed to support these vulnerable students. We will install 2 Brightbox macro classrooms at Yangani Primary School and Yoyo Secondary School in the Bidi Bidi refugee settlement, supporting the transition from primary to secondary in the region, impacting 12,000 learners each week, providing a microgrid of power and resources for the entire local community. And the revenue these installations generate will support future installs. I'm exceptionally lucky to work with such an inspiring and talented team. I've previously built and scaled organizations. I'm deeply passionate about the problem we're tackling, and I'm wrapping up a PhD in economic development. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present our project to you.
Wow, a firework of innovations and creative solutions. Thank you to our first 5 finalists for a great start to an exciting week. Who will win this challenge? Do you have any idea yet? Then register directly on our website makingprosperity.com to watch the award ceremony live on September 6th. And don't forget to follow us also on social media at Make for Prosperity. Shall we directly move on to the next challenge? I think I would like to keep the tension up a little longer, so tune in again tomorrow to meet our next 5 finalists competing with solutions for sustainable and healthy food for all. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, same time, same place, new challenge.